Good morning, everyone. Great to see you. I'm Dr. Juwan Johnson, the interim director, interim Robert Francis Ings director of the Lemon Project, A Journey of Reconciliation, and welcome to day 2 of the Lemon Project 16th annual symposium. So um, give yourselves a hand for being here. And as we started yesterday, Dr. Black, as you know, powerfully kicked us off. For those who were not here, for those who were here, for those who were not here, these sessions are being recorded, and so they will be available 3 to 4 weeks after the symposium. Also, hello to our Zoom participants. I have to acknowledge them as well. We have our photographer here, Christina Hill. You've seen her roaming around. And the photos that she's taken will be available weeks after the symposium as well. We'll make those accessible to all of those who are registered, all right? But I want you to take some time because we're practicing community here, right? So I want you to take some time to greet the person around you, tell them something perhaps that you learned yesterday or something that you hope to learn today. So we'll give you about a minute to do that.
Y'all can prepare. That's so great.
What I learned yesterday, it was a beautiful presentation on Black male bodies. That artistry and that photography just made those bodies safe, vulnerable, right? So it caused another type of conversation.
Here, I'll move.
Yeah. So I saw that these were 3 males that were male identifying.
Mhm.
That did this work. So I just thought that made me think about that. What men carry, what does the body need? Because the body has been sexualized for so long. Like male bodies don't really talk about slavery and what their
All
bodies
right.
actually do.
So 10,
Sexualization.
9, 8, 7,
Okay.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, y'all look good. And so also before we go forward, I want to say, I noticed that we had a couple of technical difficulties in the other rooms yesterday, so we're getting that resolved, but we do apologize for those who had any Zoom technical difficulties, and we're arranging for those who perhaps did not get a chance to present in another forum. Also, lunch was a little delayed yesterday, so we apologize for that, but it will be on time today, but I think it was pretty good, right? All right. Okay. So, without further, and we also have halal and kosher meals for those who reserve those. They'll be at the registration desk. So we're going to get into this. I'm really excited about this panel. I'm kind of calling it the director's panel, and because it's something that I really envision. Of course, at the core of what we do is descendant work, not just engagement, but collaboration. And so I thought it was really important to bring together diverse voices from different regions who are really steeped in the work of building communities. And so I'm going to introduce our moderator, and he's going to take it forward. Brian Palmer Williams. He is a Peabody Award-winning journalist based in Richmond, Virginia. During his 30-year career, he has photographed conflict, politics, activism, daily life, and more around the world and in his own backyard. His strength is capturing life candidly, clearly, and creatively. He strives to tell stories and pictures about people and situations that might not otherwise be told with integrity, professionalism, independence, passion, and compassion. That's been kind of our theme for the past day, right? His photos have appeared in the New York Times, BuzzFeed, Narratively, his writing in the Smithsonian Magazine, the New York Times, and The Nation, and audio on Reveal. His documentary, Full Disclosure, which appeared in 2011 on the Documentary Channel, along with several magazine articles and photo exhibitions, grew out of 3 media embeds in Iraq with U.S. Marines. In 2019, along with his collaborator, Seth Wessler, received a Peabody for Reveal Radio story, Monumental Lies. Before going freelance in 2022, He was a CNN correspondent. Prior to that, he was in Beijing as a bureau chief for the U.S. News and World Report, during which time he photographed many of his articles. Currently, Brian is working on Make the Ground Talk with his wife, Erin Holloway Palmer, a documentary that evokes life in a historic Black community that was uprooted during World War II to build a naval base, now a top secret U.S. military installation. Along another long-term project, photography of Virginia's neglected African-American cemeteries grew out of that documentary. So he is more than capable of leading this panel today. Brian, come forth and let's welcome him with an applause.
Good morning, everyone. I was going to start seated, but I want to stand. I want to say three names. First, Dr. Jacqueline Johnson, who invited me here. Then Dr. Jody Allen, who was Erin, my wife's host, and my host 13 years ago at the Lemon Project. She invited us to be a part of an oral history workshop with Dr. Alphine Jefferson. And it was at the Lemon Project that year that we presented about Magruder and my great-grandparents and sharing relatives with many of the people in this room, Matt Palmer and Julia Fox Palmer, who were buried at Camp Perry. And then the final name that I want to speak is Robert Francis Ames. You all may know that is the title of Dr. Johnson's position. And Dr. Ames is also the author of Freedom's First Generation. You all familiar with that book about formerly enslaved people in the Hampton area. But that phrase, Freedom's First Generation, has held me since I read that book over a decade ago, because that's who we're talking about now. Our panelists are working to both uncover, reveal, and share and protect the stories of Freedom's First Generation. So the people who were enslaved, who tasted freedom after 1865, or what passed for freedom before the formal birth of Jim Crow, and their descendants. That's who we're talking about today. And I want to start by, as I said to Darius, keeping it real. This is 2026. We're experiencing war, right? This country is in a war at home and abroad and at home. We have to speak to the value of what these folks bring to our mission to make a better country. And I know that may sound cliche, but let's develop that through this talk. What is it that we can take from our ancestors, the reasons we're here, and make this a better place? So without further ado, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to ask our panelists to tell us something about themselves. So here we are, Studio 2. I'm going to go left, my left, and further left to ask our folks to first introduce themselves and then tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization. Starting with Vanessa. Okay.
So my name is Vanessa Adams-Harris. I am Muskogee Creek, African American, as well as Scott and Irish ancestry. I am from Oklahoma, and I often say I am Oklahoma, because Oklahoma was made up of Native people, people who consider themselves white, as well as people of African ancestry. And so I wear that very proudly. I'm also the youngest member of my family. I am the 13th child in my family. My father's name is Andrew Adams. My mother's name is Grace Miller Adams. I'm the granddaughter of Lewis Adams and Annie Chamberlain. I'm the great-granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson Adams and Mahalia Grayson, the the great-great-granddaughter of William Adams and Hepzibah Perryman. The Perryman name is the first native name of people that formed Tulsa, Oklahoma, coming there from and on the Trail of Tears as Native people. So Native people look just like me. That's my family. And I'm always talking about my family. And my family always comes in the room with me. And I don't know which one of those people who will be talking today. I work with the John Hope Franklin Center for Reconciliation. I believe in the work of reconciliation because I love myself. I came from a loving family, and I love, love, love talking about my people. When I went to the University of Tulsa in the anthropology department, I went to the head of the Department of Anthropology, Dr. Garrett Bailey, and I told him, I'm not coming here for you to teach me anything about Native people. I'm here to learn what you are teaching about Native people. Because you are not a Native man, I was raised by a Native man, therefore, I want to know what you're teaching about my people. I'm very serious about it. I'm passionate about it. I do not take any prisoners whatsoever. When I first met Dr. John Hope Franklin, I asked him, I always say I vomited up on him because I was a young anthropology student. I had been looking at my family's history, and I was devastated in the archives. And I ran out of the archives, and I was confused and mad. And I went to, Dr. Franklin came to Oklahoma to receive one of many awards, and I just walked up to him and grabbed him and walked him to the location where he was signing his books because nobody was escorting him.
Just quickly tell us what you do at the John Hope Franklin.
Right. So I'm the director of Outreach and Alliance for the John Hope Franklin Center for Reconciliation. And the reason I do that work is because when I met Dr. Franklin and I told him what I had found in the archives, he said to me in a moment, because I was just going on and on and on and on about how could he write like he writes? How could he write this stuff that he's finding out that is so hurtful and so painful? How could he write that stuff? And Dr. Franklin said, stop that. Your job is to tell it like you find it. That's all you are supposed to do. Just tell it, just like you find it. I said, okay, but I feel so bad. I feel so bad. He said, no. It didn't happen to you. It happened to them. And they survived. And because they survived, we're here. Now, all you have to do is tell it.
Beautiful. Jacqueline.
Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Bridgeforth-Williams. I'm the founder and executive director of the Village Initiative, a local nonprofit whose center focus is social justice in the education system here in Williamsburg, James City County. I'm a mom, I'm a filmmaker, an award-winning filmmaker at this time. For the work we've done with our film, Displaced from the Birthplace of America. It is a descendant-led project. It is the descendants telling the story because for so long, others have told our stories for us. But the way that you reclaim things is you do it yourselves. So that is how we are fortifying our community, by reclaiming our stories, and we're telling them. And for so long, others did not want to acknowledge them, or they wanted to tell them in their own way. But we, the descendants, stand to tell our stories. And I am a descendant of Alma. She was from the coast of Senegal. She was brought here through the transatlantic slave trade. So I don't take the work that I do lightly because I move in her strength and in her courage. And that's something for me that is inherited. It is ancestral. A lot of times folks won't understand how you move or what you do, and they want to come to you and they want to meet you and they want to know, What's the secret? What's the blueprint? It's ancestral. That's something that I inherited. It's in my DNA. I can't explain it. I didn't ask for it. God placed that assignment on my life. And there's a scripture that says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." So that is what our work is about. It's about giving hope to generations to come and for the future. We are working for the young people. Through the Village Initiative, we are claiming what was never meant to be claimed, what was meant to be lost. We placed over 15,000 books and learning material in the children's hands in Williamsburg, James City County in a 2-year period. We built the local, thank you. Because as we've heard here on yesterday, and I'm sure we'll hear again today, that education is power. We built the local Black Histories Project. The local Black Histories Project is committed to telling the stories of the local African American community through a descendant-led group that leads it. We built what's called the Local Black Histories Curriculum in partnership with the College of William and Mary and the local school system, where local African American history has been taught in our schools since 2017 through the K through 12 students of Williamsburg, James City County. And with that and that collaboration, we've also been able to extend that to college students as well, to teach them how to move. When you come into a descendant community, you're not there to lead the descendants, you're there to walk beside them and support them. I think during COVID, we fed over 1,300 families a week, because our mission stands social justice and caring for our community. So when the students were not in school, we were able to provide food and clothing and support through many of our donors and partners throughout the community. Our work has been recognized by the Virginia Educators Association. We received the Social Justice Award for our advocacy in the schools, because we advocate and we stand in the truth for what is right for our students. Because through our equity report that we do every year, we found that there are still inequities that exist since integration. We have a double-digit achievement gap in our schools, and many other inequities, such as a disproportionate rate of suspension and expulsion of minority youth, which we know leads to the school-to-prison pipeline. So we are working to eradicate that in our community and beyond. And that was featured in Essence magazine. So we know that's an important issue, not only here in our community, but around our country. And I'll close by saying spaces like this remind us that history is not just something we study, but it is something that we carry. And our film tells you, because we were displaced, we were not erased. And we are here to make sure that everyone knows that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And Darius.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Darius Johnson. I'm from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, a little community called Big Woods in Kent County. I often say that, I come from a family that's super rooted, a family that goes back 10 to 12 generations, which is a common thing for Kent County, Maryland. Everybody there is super rooted. Take this how you want it. Everybody there is related because nobody left. But we have tight-knit communities, tight-knit families, rich culture that, I was blessed to grow up and witness and be a part of. And, I was just thinking this morning about just this panel and just like why I feel so blessed to be able to do what I do. And I think about my grandmother, Betty Louise Johnson. And it's one of those things where, you always are told, talk to your elders before it's too late. And she was always just a stoic woman. She watched me. My parents would work. My mom has a house cleaning business. Dad does concrete work. So I was always down with her. And she didn't say much, but she took in a lot. And when she passed in 2015, her daughter gave me, these 2 big bins of just all these newspaper clippings and articles and photos and, things that she would jot down in the margins just about, Black history. And I grew up in a community, in a space where I was constantly moving through white spaces as one of the only Black folks in there. So I didn't grow up with the privilege of really knowing a lot about Black history. And, I'm looking at this bin and I'm like, man, like Mom and Betty had it all right there. And I never really had, I won't say I didn't have the wherewithal to ask her. but just for whatever reason, that didn't happen. But I feel like I'm still in conversation with her just by having those materials, and then just being able to do what I do every day, preserving local family history. So I really give a lot to her, give a lot to my ancestors for just instilling this interest in history for me. I consider myself somebody who's more of a community developer with a history forward perspective. I've worked in affordable housing, land conservation, workforce development, business analytics, but this pursuit that I'm on now really started as a personal journey, just to know more about myself and my identity as a Black man as I was just coming into adulthood. And then it translated from supporting myself to figuring out how I could model that to support others in my community who were going through the same journey. And then now I'm blessed to be, a father of an 18-month-old. That's I love it. I'm constantly tired, but that's what it is. Yeah. But I went from for myself, for my community, and now I'm like, okay, how can I instill this in him? And then my wife and I have another child coming by next month. So yeah, so even more so, I'm just like, okay, like we really do live through our generation. So how can what I'm doing now be something that puts them in a position to just prosper, to feel prideful about where they come from and who they are, and not go through some of the things that I went through with self-esteem and understanding myself. So again, I'm blessed to do this work. I'm excited for this panel. I'm excited to be up here with each of you, and just even inspired already by the remarks that we started with. So I'll stop there and get into it.
Thank you, Darius, Jacqueline, and Vanessa for giving us a sense of what you do. Darius, when I said to you this morning, I really appreciate what Chesapeake Heartland does. On your website, there are digital collections of what we'll probably call ephemera now. So letters from and to the governor, homegoing programs. Those are going to have, they have value now, but 50 to 100 years from now, oh my God. So can you speak to that? Each of you, Jacqueline, you've done this to some degree, but a specific aspect of your work and how that helps get the descendant message out and make our democracy better.
So this is something that happened a few months ago. And just to give context, so our project, Chesapeake Heartland, we document, digitize, and interpret local African-American history. So we have in our archive, I believe it's around at least 6,000 items in the archive related to local Eastern Shore Black history, contributed primarily from community members. But then we've also been working with Maryland State Archives, Maryland Center for History and Culture, and the American Antiquarian Society to bring out some more of those institutional records and pair them with the community records. So you have chattel slavery records of families, going back to 1750s, and those same families are represented in photo albums and the homegoing programs, that are more contemporary. So we have this timeline of, this amazing history and culture for many, 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 many families. One of the things that jumped out to me that I don't want to say this necessarily is something that, really influences democracy or catalyzes it or brings about change, but in the work that we do, and I'm looking at my colleagues, Jalen, Carolyn, Airlee, we always talk about, how can we get more Black folks engaged in the work we do beyond just preserving their materials? And for me, I'm like, how can I get more Black folks my age? I'll be 33 this year. So I'm just thinking, like, how can we get them more tapped in? And over the past year, I've had two guys that I went to high school with reach out to me over Facebook after we share some of the materials. Specifically some materials around a community in Chestertown that, a lot of poverty, a lot of crime, how that goes. But that isn't the full narrative, we share more of a positive narrative of that space. So one of them is like, man, like, I just really appreciate what y'all are doing because y'all are changing the narrative about what it means to live in this community beyond what's seen in the newspaper headlines, the police blotter, the Facebook posts, that type of thing. And we want to keep instilling more and more of that because I think it's those types of things that it gets people thinking about their identity differently and their community differently. And when you start thinking differently about that, then you can be empowered to bring about change.
let me stick with you for a moment and kind of home in, because we're coming from Oklahoma, we're coming from Maryland. Your 18-month-old will grow up. What is it in your archive, in your work, that you want your youngin' to know, to feel, as he or he moves forward? That very specific thing. How is it that these stories, that this evidence of African American existence, resilience, is a tool for him?
Yeah. So I think about Dr. Black's message yesterday, and one of the things he said was that I'm not going to say exactly how he said it, but he was speaking on how, slavery is not our history; it was imposed on us. And what we do at Chesapeake Heartland is we acknowledge injustices, but we really try to lean into the positive narratives of our community. So I want him to see, all the Black love examples we have in our archive. We have so many materials about weddings in the community, birthday parties. My third birthday party is in our archive. And then also we have yearbooks from Garnett High School, which was the Black high school. And that's just such an amazing collection because, we had something. We had something that was our institution that was really lifting up the community to the point where I'm sharing stuff on Facebook about it. And a cousin of mine who lives in California now is like, man, the school's integrated when I was in 8th grade and I wanted to go to Garnett so bad. And on that same post, a white gentleman in the community was just like, he was proud of integration. He was like, I'm glad it happened. So it was interesting seeing that juxtaposition.
Wow.
But it's one of those things where for my son, even for myself, I'm just like, we need to show more of what we had as a community, the nuances, those positive examples, because it's not, we know it more or less. Sometimes we've forgotten about it, and we're also in the business of reminding people. But I just think we need to show more of those nuances of positive examples of our experience.
Jacqueline, you gave us a number of examples. Can you give us one program and then speak to that issue of what is it concretely that we're trying to give our youth that will help them persevere and thrive?
I would say probably, our local Black Histories Project, because then you're teaching them their history and you're teaching about the struggle. You're teaching them that they come from greatness, and that they are resilient. Our people have been resilient, and they're learning the history of their people. For me personally, it's been so powerful to learn about my people, to learn about my grandmother's history. My grandmother here locally, she was a homeowner, and she was one of the people that was displaced more than once, as we told the story about displaced from the birthplace of America. So it's been very powerful for me to learn about these people, just to learn about this woman. So for them to learn about their ancestors, to learn their history, and to just know that they're resilient and that they can be great, and that every room will not recognize you. Every room that you're in doesn't define who you are. We do programs in the schools. I was in a program a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that struck me, and also one of my counterparts who happens to be white, was that the little Black boys kept getting pulled out of the program. And some of the comments that the teacher made to me as to her sternness, and they know what is going to happen to them. And I'm thinking, so what message are we conveying not only to the little Black boys, but the white children as well? That these guys are the troublemakers, that they're the problem. And honestly, I couldn't see it. What I wanted was for all of the children to stay there and to get the entire message and to see, what we were sharing, because it was important for everyone in the room. So I want the children to know their worth and know that they are great and that they can accomplish anything. And it really starts with us. So we need to, work harder and come together to make sure that the children understand who they are and that they are of value.
Thank you. Vanessa.
So the mission of the John Hope Franklin Center for Reconciliation, I'm going to read it, is in the spirit of Dr. John Hope Franklin, the center promotes reconciliation and generate trust through scholarly work and constructive community engagement. I am surrounded by the descendant community. Our executive director is a descendant of survivors of the massacre of 1921. The president of the board is a descendant of survivors of the massacre of 1921. Over 6,500 people survived the massacre. The community was made up of about 11,000 people of African descent. And so some people have not been remembered. And I'm always talking to children. We don't think about the children that were left behind and the orphans that happen when communities are displaced, are disrupted, or war happens. And so when I'm talking to children, especially, because this is our 17th year of our symposium in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Before that word reconciliation appeared in our park in a public place, within the Greenwood district, before that word appeared, people were not dealing with, grappling with out loud what they were feeling, even though we had memorial sites there already. And as a matter of fact, all throughout the Greenwood district is a memorial site. Everywhere you're walking is where people died, where people lived, where people played, where people loved, where people were dreaming. It's a sacred site. African American communities are sacred sites. So we talk about this openly, but I had a little boy. We were standing in one of the historic homes that was saved during urban renewal, because the community was struck 4 times. A massacre, zoning laws that come in the 40s and 50s, desegregation, and then urban renewal. We're standing in this historic home, which all the children love, a historic home. They love it. And a little boy, he was in the 5th grade, African-American boy, he kept on pushing me and saying, are you going to tell them about how they killed black people? Are you going to tell them? Are you going to tell them this? Are you going to tell them that? And I said, yeah, I'm going to tell them. Just hold on a minute. I'm going to tell them. So as I got to that portion of the story, because I was talking about the house, as I got to that portion of the story, he stood right there before me and he said, you told them. You told them, right? So what I knew is that little boy knew his history. He was a descendant of survivors. But he did not know about the survival of the family and what that looked like until he was standing in that house. Because those people that survived, they rebuilt that community. So that's just not resiliency. That's something else, and we need to find a name for what that is, because that's something else. There's no shame in surviving. We are a colonized group of people who assimilated, and that assimilation causes survival, so that a little boy is standing in front of me who knows more than the teacher that brought them there. Because the expectation was that white teachers were supposed to know how to teach the violence that comes from white people to black children, when oftentimes the white people don't know the violence that was perpetrated to the white people, right? And so when you say that exactly, children know, because children were involved. And so I tell children now, and I'm working with our interpreters too, to be able to speak to the fact that when a war happens or a massacre happens or a community is attacked, children are standing right there beside us. And so know that little babies died in the house, burnt alive. And we have to say that ugly thing out loud, because we are seeing it in real time today. So we can't be afraid to say that, because children know that.
Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. And I'll just note that 13 years ago, when I was sitting in this, I think it was in this same room, Joanne, we were very, or some people were very tentative about addressing things that everybody here is addressing head on. We are talking about white supremacy. We are talking about violence. We're also talking about resistance and resilience and thriving. That's critical. So how many in here have heard about America 250? Yeah, Williamsburg, I know that's a big thing. So in my non-journalist, non-cemetery person life, I'm the memorialization public historian at James Madison's Montpelier, and my job is to amass information about the 300 or so people who were enslaved by James and Dolly Madison and James's father and James's grandfather, Ambrose. One of the things that I notice around this time as we're about to celebrate the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, is that we tell the story of the great founding fathers and their brilliance and their high principles, and then we tell the story of slavery over here. For me, they're the same story, right? And to be intellectually honest and to be potentially transformative, you have to accept that that they're the same story, right? So this is a question to you folks as we approach this. What is it? A sesquicentennial? That help me with that. But as we approach America 250, how does your work bring those two stories together? And again, I'm not just talking about how the enslaved people endured, which is critical, but how they resisted. So for example, we can talk about at Montpelier the blacksmith Moses, who ran a Revolutionary War blacksmith shop that had over 250 clients and counting now. It was not his blacksmith shop. It was James Madison Sr.'s blacksmith shop. But we could also talk about Anthony, enslaved by James Madison Sr., who escaped once, was recaptured, and escaped twice, and was never heard from again. So that, to me, is part of the Montpelier story. It's a part of the American 250 story. How do you bring the slavery and the great founding fathers story together? That's a hard one.
I don't like the founding fathers. The founding fathers killed Native people. They were violent men.
That's right.
I do not like them, even though that name, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, is in my Native family, right? Because they named themselves after important people. But I do not like them. So I do approach them, and we try to talk about the truth. Part of reconciliation first starts with recognizing that you have to actually speak and know the truth. And as human beings, we might have violent tendencies, and we might be greedy, and we might cheat, and we might steal, and we might lie, in addition to loving and being a part of a family that loves us. Those other things might be true as well. But Oklahoma did not become Oklahoma until 1907. So our 250 is not. America in 250 in Indian Territory area was Indians who were fighting for their life. They were fighting for their life. And so we can't even start, our conversation doesn't even start with Black people necessarily, unless you bring all the people together, right? And so we have to actually excavate again and again and again. We have to pull back those layers and know that we cannot ever not be talking about Native people of this land. Because when I first saw that 250 year, and my executive director, he's really funny. He really takes no prisoners. And I said, we need to be doing something on the 250 year. We need to be a part of that. Let's, what is the University of Tulsa doing? What is it? He was like, that doesn't make any difference to us. We're not doing that. We're going to stay focused on what we're doing. Stay focused on what we're doing. And so focused on what we're doing is telling the truth. And we can't help but say 250 years of the United States of America, Oklahoma did not exist 250 years ago. It did not exist as Oklahoma. So how do we then talk about that space, and how do we make it fit into the schism called America?
Thank you. Jacqueline, yes.
Well, I often now hear my grandmother and I hear my ancestors saying, tell it and tell it right. So that's where we have to start. We need to tell the history and we need to tell it right. That is our duty, first and foremost. And we know that though we were not identified as the founding fathers, we were the nation builders because it was built on our back. And we have yet to be compensated for that. The 250th committee, we've reached out several times to share our award-winning film, Displaced from the Birthplace of America. And we have yet to receive a response. So how we respond to the 250th is we do what they say. We tell it, and we tell it right. We continue to be truth tellers. Oftentimes I'm in rooms where there's no one that looks like me, but I go in there boldly and I go courageously to tell it and tell it right. And oftentimes people get up and they ask me, well, Miss Jackie, what can we do to make it better? How can we change it? How can we fix it? For me, that's a loaded question. Because really, you should ask yourself that. First of all, that tell it and tell it right is not just directed at us, but it's directed at you. So while I'm over here being busy about my people's business and my ancestors' business and telling it right, you need to tell yours right. You need to talk about your grandparents that may still be living, who were the ones spitting on us when we were integrating those schools, throwing rocks. You need to talk about, I listened to this gentleman tell a story, and he was traveling with his father down south. And he says, Daddy, you're going to turn around. I see that big pinata up there those people are beating on. His father was hightailing it out of there. That wasn't a pinata. That was someone being lynched. Those are the stories that we need to talk about until we reconcile. So I would just ask people also to be mindful. When you're in a room, and I heard someone yesterday ask about empathy and sympathy and all of those things, really stand in that empathy and put yourself in that person's shoes and think, would I ask them that? Would I want someone to ask me that? Because you got to dig deep. So the whole 250th thing, that's great for Williamsburg. We also have to remember that the reason that organizations like ours are doing the work because Williamsburg chose not to do it. They chose not to tell our story. They chose to put a parking lot over a burial ground where a church was located that was centered right there where Colonial Williamsburg is, because they chose not to tell that story. I heard someone yesterday talk about the roses growing up through the concrete. Well, that's all over here. You can walk right down the street, concrete. But now they're unearthing it, and they are, the graves have been discovered. I sat in the room with the folks that are doing the planning or whatever and what happens next. And they said, well, we're only going to do the DNA, I think it's for 3 of the bodies. And one of the women in the audience, she said, dig them all up. Tell everybody, as you should. And we knew that and it's like, oh, well, it's too long ago, but there's some bodies down there at Jamestown who don't descend from what I descend from, and they're a lot older than ours. And folks are getting their DNA and telling their story. So, even with the 250th, the 250th is great in its own right for what it needs to be and what they've chosen to serve. But I'm going to continue to do what my grandmother is telling me. And she's saying, tell it and tell it right.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Darius.
So I work in a building that it was built by somebody who, he wasn't a founding father, but he represents that elite class, that elite group of men. I'll say his name because, you know, people should look into him. Thomas Ringgold. He built this building in 1746. He was son of liberty. He financed many, many, many elements of the American Revolution. I've held documents with him talking about America's liberties and the ideals that were being put forth. And every day I walk into a building where there's a vault that likely held people who built the communities that I grew up in, the ones that have survived. But then there's also the ones that didn't survive, the hundreds that didn't survive. And that contrast is just striking. It's with me every day. And I don't know. I mean, for me, it's one of those things where it's we struggle with it, but we're turning his house into a Black hub for cultural heritage. You know, we're doing this work every single day to preserve our history and uplift our communities. But when it comes to 250, I mean, just being real, I'm disengaged from it because the people that I care about are trying to make it to the next day. They're trying to pay for their bills. They're trying to raise their kids. They're trying to afford childcare. They're trying to find something to eat. They're trying to preserve their home, pay taxes, not lose the home. And with 250, I mean, it's important to recognize, you know, where we've come from. But when I said earlier about I'm a community developer that's history forward, I'm just thinking how do the stories actually lead to some positive outcomes for the way that people are living? Because I'm not trying to just do this whole year of uplifting these stories and then we go back to status quo. People are still struggling. You know, communities declining. And I wrote this down earlier. I didn't know when I was going to be able to bring it up, but and this gets to the whole, like, we can't just stop at stories. So we have a program at Chesapeake Heartland called Hip Hop Time Capsule, where you pay high school students $1,200 for 2 weeks to go into our digital archive and then they create artwork, poetry, music, and even do some hands-on crafts inspired by that history. So this past summer, we changed the program a little bit and expanded it to focus on a site that was a former plant called Vita Foods, where from 1940 to 1973, it was a major employer in Kent County, especially for Black women in the community. So that building is being redeveloped, and it's being redeveloped by Washington College. This is where I work. So through Hip Hop Time Capsule, we told the students, look at this building and think about how you can make your mark on it, because it's going to be a place for economic opportunity and educational opportunity that can support the college students, but it's also meant to support a community like you. So for that 2 weeks, the students were working on this project, understanding the cultural landscape of the area around it, which was a predominantly Black community. The Uptown area had Charlie Graves Uptown Club, was a Chitlin Circus stop, many Black businesses, Black churches. So it was like many anchors. And I remember there was one student, Makai, and in the first week when we introduced him to the history of the community, he was like, oh, y'all don't want to know about this history. There's the trenches down there. So I'm just like, well, what do you mean? Because we had 50 kids, Black, white, all types of identities. And he was like, nah, I'm not going to speak on it. I'm not going to speak on it. So I was like, you know, he's thinking about something. So throughout that week, you know, him and I, we'd always joke around. But then I was also asking him one day, I was like, Makai, like, what's your plan, man? Because you clearly have something in your mind that you've been sitting with and you see what's going on, but I know you're in it too. And he's like, man, I'm smart. I know I'm smart. And I said, I got a plan. So I'm like, all right, well, let me know. We can talk about it. And last month, looking at Facebook, Chestertown Police Department, and I see that Makai gets caught up in a shootout right in that same community. Attempted murder. He's 17 years old. And I'm just like, damn. We can't just stop at the stories. But 250 is so anchored on just the stories. And that's why I'm disengaged. Because what's that doing for the Makais? You know, is there more that we can do? And I can't remember which one of you were speaking on this, but in that same community, you know, we have scrapbooks in our digital archive, a lady named Tina Sparks, and she documented through these newspaper clippings from 1960 to 1980s what was happening. And if you look at that, you'll see that same community was over-policed year after year, till this day, still. So in my mind, I'm like, man, you've got generations of kids growing up seeing that. That's their normal. I'm in the barbershop one day. That morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a big police raid right in that community, and people walk in the barbershop. Yeah, they hit us again. I was celebrating my birthday, and they came in our house. But I'm all right. I'm like, that's not normal.
That's not.
And then the kids got to go to school because that was 3 in the morning. Bus is coming around at 7. So I'm just like, man, like that constant over policing, and then that's what happens to somebody like Makai. And we were trying to intervene the best way, paying the kids to get involved and learn their history, giving them a great program to be a part of, anchored by the college institution, but it ain't enough. So 250 is all right, but you got to do more than that.
I'm a journalist, so I love specifics and I love specific stories. So thank you all. One of the reasons that I, asked that story is because I've learned only recently that African Americans were in conversation with the founding fathers. So our founding fathers and founding mothers like Phyllis Wheatley were in conversation. Benjamin Banneker was in conversation with Thomas Jefferson. Lemuel Haynes, the preacher, was in conversation with James Madison, and they were saying slavery is wrong. They were saying, and you may disagree or agree, that the Declaration of Independence holds universal values that apply to black people as well. Frederick Douglass in the beginning said, nah, that ain't true. This is a slavery document. But around 1851, he came to the view that, yes, this is a universal document and it applies to us. Now, was that a strategic move or was it in his heart? I don't know. But I feel that that is a tool. It's being used as a tool to give us, or for us to take, what we deserve, first-class citizenship. So for me, I'm not really sure what 250 means other than to tell all of these stories, how we've been failed and how we've fought against. But I want to draw that line between, say, a Benjamin Banneker, a Phyllis Wheatley, and a Fannie Lou Hamer, and an Ella Baker, a Septima Clark, a Pauli Murray. They use those ideals to make this country live up to what it promised, right? So that's what it means to me. It's like, okay, we're going to celebrate this Declaration of Independence. Let's celebrate the people who are fighting to make it real for everybody. So, Dr. Johnson, do we have time for questions? Questions for the panel. Microphone person, can you get the microphone to the gentleman with the hand up? Anybody else? So we can just kind of line you up.
Raise hand. Yep, no worries.
I just want to make a brief comment on 250. There's lots of different ways to look at it, and the way that I'm looking at it is I seize that narrative. So my cousins and I have been talking about free men of color, well, men of color who fought in the Revolutionary War, because I'm not going to let the narrative stand that America was created by people who now deserve it, while people of color stood idly by, because we're never idle. We're always active. And we built this country several times over because we owned it initially, because we as enslaved people gave 100%, because we as free people of color paid double taxes. So, more than anyone else, we built this. And so what I'm trying to show, and we're doing these presentations all over Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and now DC, is to show the men of color who did this so that narrative won't stand, that we created America and you're just a wart on it. And so what we do, we do, and you just have to go along with it. Putting us back into the story. I'm not saying everyone has to do that, but I don't want that story to stand as only someone else's.
Beautiful. Who's next?
So I have a quick question. Have you guys thought about extending your work beyond your bloodline descendancy or your direct community? And the only reason I'm thinking of it, because you had brought up Benjamin Banneker, and as a fellow Marylander, hey, I'm actually in Baltimore, and there's a lot of mention of Benjamin Banneker in an area called Catonsville where there's a museum for him. But we don't bring him up a lot in Black history, Black communities, and this type of work. We have the usuals, Frederick Douglass and everything, and it almost seems like Benjamin Banneker doesn't have any descendants, either directly or in the diaspora. And so in your work, have you thought about extending beyond your direct bloodline or community in your work? And if you have, how have you thought about doing that?
So since I brought up Benjamin Banneker, let me take that question. As an African American with roots in this place before 1865, of course we have to go beyond our bloodline. So when I was trying to tell the story of my great-grandparents, there's very little documentation about them. So we have to look at the concentric circles about their community, people like them, people who served in the United States colored troops, like my great-grandfather, who could not read or write because he was denied that privilege, that right. But there's another man named William I. Johnson from Goochland County. He was enslaved in the same county, Goochland, that my great-grandfather was. They both served in USCT. They both settled in Richmond. So my point is, we have to assemble these stories from parallel stories. So the story of my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother will never be complete. But I will have information. I will be able to share information with you about it because I know what William I. Johnson did. I know what other people from the Magruder community did. I think we had a question over here.
Yes. How you doing? Dr. Darren Jackson here. I wanted to ask a question about how do we preserve these stories within the context of this next generation that's coming up. I'm in my 30s as well, and I work with youngins a lot, from very little to medical school age, because I teach at medical school. So when I was growing up, there seemed to be a very intentional way that many Black stories were just woven into every aspect of my experience as a child. Growing up in the 90s in New York, you learn Black stories from just watching a sitcom at 7 o'clock at night with your parents. You'll hear stories about Black stuff, Black history, from the music and things like that. Now, as someone who went through medical school and residency training through this COVID era, and then as we all see social media, and its effects kind of climb throughout the years, and then we had this pocket of time where we had social media and COVID lockdown happening at the same time. This had tremendous effects on our youth.
Yes.
Not only just from emotional regulation to attention. There's certain things that I see medical students doing now that I'm like, are you serious? And you have to practice empathy because you understand what the context was when they came up. So going back to the Black stories, there's Black stories that was just general, accessible back then. Now we have the focus on social media. There's effects of how it played on our attention span. How do we preserve these stories for the youth that may not have as much access to these stories, to the significance, the nuances of what being a Black American is? And when I'm teaching medical students and I'm hearing some of the things that Black American medical students are saying about them not understanding their history or them not having any reference of what it is to be a Black American, and then they adopt the aesthetics of Blackness. Like I'm wearing certain things, certain person, I'm from Texas, I got my cowboy boots on, but tell me about the Buffalo Soldiers.
So panelists, take it. Go, Jacqueline.
I'll try to answer that. So first of all, intentionality is important. So we must be intentional. We've been very intentional about gathering the stories, honoring the ancestors, and having the descendants to have a say so that the stories are told wholly and truthfully. Boots on the ground. You have to go into the communities. We have to be, you have to have action. You have to go beyond the what can we do. It has to be actionable. If we are intentional about making these films, yes, we have one award-winning film, but we've made three. We've made one that covers integration. The first fully integrated class, Mary is here. The class is here. Stand up. I'm sorry, but they're here. Some of them are here, and they came. And I'm gonna get emotional because mentorship matters. You see, those women and those men from that class, I honor them because they endured things, right? And so we were honored to tell their story, to do a film with them. We take that film into the schools. Any teacher who is willing, because that is in the SOLs, it's in the standards of learning. At some point, they're going to learn about integration. This is a powerful tool that teaches those children, and some of them identify. My great grandmother was a part. They identify, and then we tell the story of the descendants from the reservation. We have a film with them, and we go into the schools. Mary is a descendant of the reservation. Yes, and many descendants, they're raising their hands. It has been so it's collaborative. If you have with us, we've had the heart and the willingness in this organization, right? And then there's been others who've had the resources. And then we've had the descendants who wanted to tell the stories. So we've all collectively come together to do this. And a young lady asked earlier about going beyond your bloodline. Samuel and Joanna Harris, they had a huge store here in Williamsburg. They were entrepreneurs. They were landowners. They sold land to others. We tell their story in our film. So many people were impacted by them, even so much as the college. There's stories that say that Mr. Harris was able to loan money to the College of William and Mary. This wealthy black man, so his story lives on through what he did in this community. But when you walk down that street, there is nothing that tells you that they were there. Not one thing. The first black doctor in Williamsburg, Dr. J. Blaine Blayton. Wasn't that long ago, he was my doctor. A great friend to my family, and I'm sure to many in this room. When we do our tour, we do a local Black Histories tour with the descendants. We bring those children, those students, K through 12. We're teaching them. They're out there on that tour. They're learning about those folks. They're learning about that space. We have a freedom school. Right now, our freedom school is teaching August Wilson. So we've crowdfunded and we've gotten all these books. Every kid gets a gift and they get every single August Wilson play, right? And every month we do a different play. Thank you, Omiyemi. I don't know if she's in the room today, but Omiyemi, her organization, OmniWorks, and The Village, and St. John Baptist Church, and we partnered together to do that. And if we have one child, 2 children, or 10, we're committed to doing it every single month, right? Wow. So you have to be, boots on the ground, intentionality, and you have to be committed if only one person shows up. So if you care about it and it's something that you feel should happen, you got to step away. You may have to step away from some things you're doing, and you got to be boots on the ground. So many of us come into these rooms, but we are not boots on the ground. We got to be that boots on the ground changes things.
Can no, I'm redirecting because that is brilliant. And Darius, I want to pick up on the social media piece though. So we had the film piece, the importance of being in the community with your materials, with your stories. Talk to me about your internet, social media. How does that get to the youth?
Yeah. So I'll try to answer that, but I want to get on a point that might dovetail into it too. I often think that, I don't know if I want to call it a misconception, but I said it, so it might be, that's what it is. But I think we prioritize the stories of the elders, when we're trying to understand history, and we don't think about the youth and having them be able to share their perspective. So what I mean by that is, we do a lot of oral histories with Chesapeake Heartland, and a lot of the times it's, here's this person, tell us your life story, but also tell us what you've seen throughout your life story. And I think that just as easily we could go to a 16-year-old, and you may only have 16 years of life to speak to, but you've seen things and you have perspective. And then if we capture it at that point, then we can come to you again at 30, we can come to you again at 60, we can come to you again at 80, at 90, and then we can see a continuum of how you view things over time, which is history. And I think that oftentimes the youth feel disengaged because we're always talking at them. And speaking on social media is talking at all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're over consuming every single day. I have a time limit for Instagram and Facebook that I hit ignore like 10 times a day. So even for stuff like this, we can't just keep talking at and keep putting it in people's faces. We have to be in conversation with, and the youth understand that and they know that. And on the social media front, there's the misconception that the youth don't know their history, but I look on TikTok and Instagram reels and they're giving me stuff that I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then they're going to these places and documenting them and then going viral about the way that they're perceiving this history and putting out there to the public. So there's definitely a gap in what we think is real and in what's actually real. The youth are doing a lot more than we realize.
Wow.
And I think it's one of these things that the platforms are changing so quickly that people just can't keep up with it and understand it. Social media is like my social research, so I love just looking at it to see how people are responding to things. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? Who's doing it? And the youth are doing it. But we need to, and how you say boots on the ground too, we need to step into the spaces that they're more active in and understand the language and how they're talking, their vernacular, because we got to be speaking the same language. There's got to be that back and forth.
Vanessa.
I just want to piggyback on what Darius is saying about that the youth know. They know quite a bit. And whenever I'm talking with them, I always tell them that they are now the expert of 15-year-olds. Yep. I've passed that age, so now I need to listen to what they are saying. And we have created a historic walking tour map of the district that includes all the information and some of the sites available for them. We created a historic map, which gives the exact history, and it gives a map of the area in Tulsa. And what I realized, though, talking about boots on the ground, is that I have a one-woman show called Big Mama Speaks, written by Hannibal Johnson, and I adapted it. But it's a survivor's story, but it's a survivor's story from 11 years old. She was a child when the massacre happened, and so children really listen to that elder speaking because she's speaking about what she remembered happened to her when she was a child. And so she gives all of the things that children remember about life being XYZ and what you were thinking about and then what happened. But I had the most profound thing that happened is when I was standing in front of a child talking about giving them a historic perspective, a little boy, an African-American boy, he asked me, how do you do what you do? How and why are you doing that? And I said, because I love myself, I love my family, and I love history, actually. And he said, I want to do that. And so what I did is, just like I grabbed Dr. John Hope Franklin, I went to the Tulsa Historical Society, and I said, how many people look like me are working here? Why aren't you all out going to the schools telling children that they can be historians, that they can be preservationists? Why aren't you doing that? I don't expect them to do it, but I want them to know that I know they're not doing it. And so I always ask that question, where am I? Because I know children are standing in front of us and they don't see themselves. And that hurts my feelings. And I'm going to show up.
Do we have time for one more question?
Oh.
Dr. Johnson? Yeah.
Maybe not me.
Yes. Hello, microphone person.
Okay. I was just thinking about you guys are so inspiring, and we're all leaders in our own right? Like, doing amazing things. And I'm in my 50s, but our subject matter experts, we have to remember, are also in the teens and in the 20s, and we can start hiring them to help us reach those young people, which is so critical. That's all.
I think we can squeeze in 2 more. Oh, 2 minutes or 2 more.
Good morning.
Okay.
My name is Jacqueline Gardner, and we are celebrating the 250th anniversary at First Baptist Church in Williamsburg. The church was organized in 1776. We are preparing for tours. We want you to come see the history because we were there when we could not pray unless we were hiding in the bushes. And we have come so far from the bushes to the brick church. We are keeping that history alive. I know there are members of First Baptist Church in here. Raise your hand, support me. Come on, family. So it is part of our history. When they struck a token or something recognizing the country, they also struck one for First Baptist Church in Williamsburg.
Beautiful.
So we are so happy to have you to tell this history. We were there. We are learning. We are talking. We are telling. We are teaching this history because we are here.
And it speaks to the fact that we get to define what America 250 is.
Thank you.
As well. And we have one more. Oh gosh. Oh goodness. Okay. Yes.
Yes, I just want to make a statement. You're talking, you're elders, and you're talking to the young people. This is what happened to us yesterday. 62 years ago, I was in a foxhole getting shot at in Vietnam. My best friend was there with me. It wasn't until last night he called and told my wife, wasn't it tough going to the Inception Center? He came from Greenville, Alabama. He said, I had to ride on the back of the bus. I never knew this. I wasn't talking to my best buddy, my best friend. So we need to talk to one another these experiences. I grew up in Ohio. I didn't know it was that bad in Alabama. Just want you to know that.
Beautiful. Can we squeeze in this gentleman here who's been waiting patiently?
All right, thank you. I hear the anger. I hear the pain. I hear the hurt. I hear the love. As an educator, I see the faces. I see the people. And I hear the children. But are we listening to the children? A young brother that ended up he's incarcerated now for the crime. The little boy, I said, what do? You reached him. These kids are not taught to embrace their history themselves. It's by design. History is power. And there's power here with what they're saying. And then the main thing of power is to listen. And if you go back to the orators of our people, our culture, they told stories. And so we hear these stories, but we got to listen to these kids because they're going to tell you your pain. And that kid came to you and he said, what do you do? How do you do this? He wanted you to tell him how to have that power because the Spirit sent you to him. And that's the thing as a teacher. When I listened to the kids and I said, I want your opinion. And they're like, why? Nobody cares about my opinion. When I said, I want to hear what you have to say and then act on it, that empowers that kid.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they talk about post-traumatic stress syndrome is now traumatic stress disorder. These kids are in it now. We know how to deal with it, some of us, but we have to be able to show them how to overcome because that's power when you can get out of trying to rob somebody. When you know somebody's been killed and you got to, how can I rise up and find that power? I'm not going to take much time, but thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson is coming over to, you're going to wrap us up? Oh, the response to that. I mentioned that 13 years ago, the tone of this conference was very different. William and Mary was very different then. People were tentative about saying certain things. And what these people on this panel and what this gentleman and everyone is doing is saying those things out loud. So yes, meeting the youth where they are, listening to the youth, but also continuing to say these things. There's an example on my mind now. Dolores Huerta. I don't speak Spanish, so, but y'all may know, 95 years old, was a collaborator with Cesar Chavez. New York Times expose accused him she revealed that he raped her and groomed other people. Dolores said that she didn't speak up about it because she knew it would be used to undermine the movement, not just to drag her through the mud, but to undermine the movement. She made a choice. She also said that she wishes that she could have said something, but she didn't understand that other people were being groomed. She did not feel that she could speak at that time, but she's speaking now at age 95. We are all speaking now, and we have to speak. That is my point. And I don't want to condemn or criticize Dolores. She was the movement, though. She was the one who brought in Filipino farm workers to unite with Mexican farm workers when Cesar Chavez wanted this all to be about his male power trip, right? So we can speak out, and we should speak out now because we're building on that work. So building on Dolores, Polly Murray, Septima Clark, Ella Baker, the folks I mentioned before. Thank you.
Let's give this panel a hand. Thank you all so much. We will have a break for the next 15 minutes before we transition to our concurrent panels. You all did a fabulous job. Thank you for taking us forward. This was great. And then we'll have some time to speak with you during the break. And so, again, thank you.